Okay. Did you have a note where we stayed?
Yes. So we were talking about I think Kimankesh, and if there's any Kimankesh today, you were explaining about that, and then also, oh yes, if someone was to visit your club, Tirandas, from abroad, what curriculum, what schedule do you put them on if they are from early beginner stage? What levels do you put them through?
Are you recording, by the way?
Yes.
Well, we have receiving a lot of visits from enthusiasts from abroad. They're visiting Tirandas practices. They all are welcome, of course. We are quite happy with our guests, and some of them are able to come a few times consecutively because they have business contact with Turkey, or because they have some other opportunity to come to Istanbul frequently. So if they are able to come a few times, so it is easier for us actually to give more information. Otherwise, we are introducing our method, what we are doing, so that they can have their own map, roadmap, to improve themselves. This method has been developed and improved by myself in the last 15 years with trial and errors and with a lot of readings, not only from archery, from sports sciences, and I'm still in touch with sports scientists because we are sharing information, especially the ones who are working particularly specifically on traditional archery. So anyway, there is a system that we created. There is a level system as well that they pass from one to another by passing theoretical exams as well as practical exams. So now we have, of course, in this context, we are not able to teach someone who is just visiting us. We can give the roadmap, what we are doing, what stages we have, how long actually how long each stage lasts approximately. For example, in the initial stage, the first stage, kepaze pulling, the trainees stay there for 8 weeks, and we advise them to pull 200 times a day, and ambidextrously, by the way, 200 right-handed, left-handed, and it makes approximately 12,000 pulls, which is the given number in the old treatises. Of course, this is an approximate number. Like, for example, in the Japanese martial arts, it says, they say that mastering a single technique requires 10,000 repetitions. So it is almost the same because the human brain is the same, right? If you want to develop muscle memory, then you have to repeat something. It is the same with writing. It's also a skill. Riding a bicycle, swimming, speaking a foreign language, all these require repetition. So after this 8-week period, there is the second stage, which is torba or sandık stage, which is shooting an arrow from a very short distance at the target, so that the release is learned and the oscillation, the initial oscillation of the arrow is taken under control, which is something to do with khatra and farka, which is the movement of the release hand, with how the lock is established and how it's released. And it also takes a few weeks. We are just monitoring the trainees so that we can see whether they are ready or not. And every month we have an examination so that they can be examined and go to the other stage. If they are ready, the instructors say that they can actually take the exam. And then we are giving some bracelets. It is not like the belt levels of the Japanese martial arts. It is just because we are practicing in an indoor range, in a closed environment, and everyone is practicing at the same time. So we have to distinguish which archer is on which stage, because when we are giving some tasks to practice, then we say that the red bracelet wants practice this and this, and the black bracelet one wants practice this and this. And it goes quite well. And once a month, at the day that we are organizing the examinations, we have also a meeting for people who are just curious, who just want to come and see Tirenda's training. It is the third Sunday of every month. Of course, in the Corona days, we could not do it the last month, but hopefully when we are back to our routine, we will continue doing that. And other than that, oh, by the way, these meetings, when the newcomers, the candidates, come and see the system, and when they accept the requirements, I mean, that they will stay at Kepaze stage for 2 months, and they will have to take examinations, etc. Then they stay. A cultural program which starts almost at November, October, November, and lasts to April. Every 2 weeks we have a seminar. People are giving subjects to work on. It is usually a volunteer, but sometimes I push a little bit and make them take that responsibility too. And they related to traditional archery. One of them was, for example, referring to your previous question about this calligraphy and martial arts. Ozan Ulu, for example, gave a great lecture, and this lecture became an article. And in fact, this is also a part of the system, the good lectures, because not all the lectures are perfect, but they are good for the channel members every 2 weeks. And depending on the individual's formation, some are from academia, some are better educated. So their lectures are better designed, better prepared. So we are requesting them to write an article based on that lecture. So, and this is the way that we are feeding our Tirenda's website. So at the very beginning, there were only my articles on the website, but what I have been trying to do is just teaching people, okay, not only how to shoot, but how to the approach, how to research, how to analyze the old treatises, which means they have to learn the method of research. So Tirenda's, even people who don't like us, accept that we are the university. So we are trying to do that. And for all the visitors from abroad, even from Turkey, there are a lot of visitors who came from the other cities of Turkey. They're always welcome. We think that Tirenda's is the real tekke in terms of the customs and traditions and the attitude. So the doors are open to everyone. But like the other education institutions, for example, for the universities are not closed to people, but you have to fulfill some requirements, right? Having a diploma from the high school and having for the visitors, we don't have any requirements, so they can come. It doesn't matter on which stage they are, because we are giving them just a roadmap. We're trying to explain the system. So it's a system that I developed with friends, of course, with my comrades, let's say. And it may not be perfect, but it's quite close to perfect. And hopefully, inshallah, I would like to write the third book about this training methodology that we have been working on for the last 15 years, including all the warm-up and technical skills, requirements for the examinations and everything.
Excellent. That would really be a very good resource for people like myself or anyone else to have all of that knowledge and experience in that book. That would be very good. Let me ask you about, and without getting into any politics or anything, but what is the role of, someone is asking, the Okcular Vakfi club in Istanbul. What is the role of this club in terms of representing modern and traditional archery Is it government? Is it a government-backed club, or is it independent?
Okay, you said apart from the political point of view, but unfortunately, it's not apart from the political point of view.
Okay.
So we all had the hope that it was going to be a good representative of the Turkish traditional archery, because when they started renovating the Archers Lodge, we went actually to the municipality who was in charge with that, and said that we have been working on this subject for years, and we are we would be happy if we can help. And they were really responsive in a positive way. They showed us the plans, the first superficial archaeological findings that the basement of the Archers Lodge have been found, everything. But the building has been built in a modern way. So it was not a restoration, it was rebuilt. But it has been a very good modern archery institution. But it could have been restored because there were a few depictions from 16th and 17th centuries. So at least the building could have been restored by following the old composition. And then we all thought that it's going to be quite good, evidence-based, like we aimed before, and like we are aiming still. But unfortunately, let's say, they did not embrace all the Turkish traditional archers. The Okcular Vakfi is being supported by the president himself, by the government. A lot of financial support is behind it. At the very beginning, they cooperated with us as well. They invited me to the Vakf foundation, as you know, to the foundation. And at that time, even established or found the foundation at the very beginning, and then later they did. But then it became a sort of their own farm. Okay. We are in touch with them, of course, because they are organizing this Conquest Cup and everything. What I cannot accept is, I have to say that at the very beginning they asked for my help, and I was really happy to be a part of it. I helped a lot. I even installed the targets in the opening ceremony myself. So it was really good, and we had big hopes. But in the third year, I mean, and in the first year, they also asked me for inviting people from abroad, and I carefully choose my friends from my own network who are writing articles for the magazines, who are real experts in their field, so that I really wanted the archery enthusiasts all over the world, in Europe and in the world, to know that a 500-year-old archery institution will be brought to life again.
Yeah.
So, and it was, I mean, 11 friends of mine have been invited from foreign countries, and many articles have been written about that. And the next year, we also participated as Tönendas archers, like we had participated a year before. And then the third year, our application has been refused by saying that there have been so many participants and we cannot accept them. And then the fourth, fifth, and the other years, we have been accepted again. But this is something not bear, okay? Because they asked my help, and I really gave it with heart and soul. But afterwards, it changed to another thing. I really wish I could say, apart from the political point of view, that and that. But unfortunately, it's not apart from the view, and something that is known by everyone. So I don't hesitate. Right? I don't want to talk politically correct about that way.
Sure. No, I understand. Look, we have to see things how they are, and while we want to, you know, the world is not perfect, and we wish that everyone can get together and work together and cooperate. Unfortunately, this doesn't always happen. we have the same experience in England when we want to establish some traditional archery clubs or horseback archery, and then certain people make it maybe too personal, and the ego gets in the way and becomes a big problem, and you have to start again, or you have to, one club becomes two clubs. Unfortunately, this is the reality. But I just wanted to know your experience.
But there's a big problem here. In the Turkish tradition, in the Ottoman tradition, tekke was open to everyone, and even the differences between social classes were ignored. And it was really unique and interesting in a society like that of Ottoman, because it was a monarchy, and the social classes were very much separated from each other, right? If you are ulema or from the military elite, you are in another class than the ordinary people. But in the Archers Lodge, everyone was considered to be equal, and it is actually another moral of the martial arts. Even the Grand Viziers, one of them, for example, Kemankesh Mustafa Pasha, who had been promoted and became the Grand Vizier, came to Archers Lodge as a Kemankesh. Of course, he wanted to shoot, but everyone got nervous because the Grand Vizier came to practice. And he said, my rank is out of the door at the moment. Here, everyone is equal. And we say in Turkish, "Şehü geda birdir," which means the inferior and the superior are identical here, because this is a brothership, sort of brotherhood in arms, sort of, okay? Yeah. Remember that I told you about the life at the borders. So the life of a warrior is completely different than the different. So, and this is, it is connected to different ethical values, different moral values, okay? For example, under Tirendaz, never ask anyone what kind of political party he or she is supporting, what religion he or she has. We don't ask that. What job he or she has. We don't. The only thing we want is they have to show the respect that the traditional archery deserves, and he has to show the respect to that method, which we believe is correct to teach people shooting in a correct way. But tekke, which has that name and has the representative of the old tradition, old custom, old understanding, and old attitude, does not. So this is the problem. So I really don't want to be politically correct, because this is my bad fortune that I have been labeled so many times by many other or many different groups of people, right? So I really don't care what kind of labels I have. Some of them right, some of them may be wrong, but the tekke as an institution should be completely different than this.
Yeah. Okay. At least my intention with all of these interviews is to give everyone an equal voice, and so that we can know everyone's position and attitude of their club and what they're doing. So it would not be fair for me to, for example, only speak to certain people at Okcular Vakfi or other clubs who maybe have an issue with you. I said it's important that we must speak to Murat as well, because I think you're a very important person in the whole picture of reviving traditional archery. So it's important that we try to listen to everyone, and hopefully over time things can improve. Let me ask you onto something different now. Someone is asking a question here in terms of archery technique. What is your what is your aiming method when you are shooting, especially with a thumb release? Do you have an aiming method, or is it more instinctive?
Okay, we are almost completely instinctive. I recently made a video about how to aim with the traditional bow. It can be found on the on YouTube. And recently, I think an Indonesian guy also translated that to Indonesian with subtitles. He asked for my approval, of course, and did it quite well. Well, we are training all the Tirandaz members as instinctive shooters, because in the ancient way of using the bow and arrow from on horseback, in the Central Asian method, or in the Middle Eastern method, you don't have time actually to shoot by using a conscious aiming method.
Right.
Something with another thing, it's not possible. So instinctive shooting should have been the base of it. I'm sure about that. And it is possible if you're trained well, and if you are persistent in practices in training, you can be quite accurate up to 30, even 40 meters shooting, as I demonstrated in many videos.
Yeah.
If it comes to shooting at longer distances, you may need some conscious aiming methods. So a good archer probably, of course, used to be able to utilize a few of these methods, not only one. So I also use the instinctive shooting, but if it comes to shooting at longer distances, I use split vision technique, which is a little bit harder to do than when shooting with Mediterranean release, because the arrow is on the other side. And the other way is using Kengibaz grip and looking from over the arrow shaft. It's also possible. So there are possibilities. But of course, here I have been trying to be as authentic as possible. For example, people say that, not people say, the treatises, in fact, the Mamluk and Ottoman treatises, the anchor point should be on the earlobe. But nowadays, we have been seeing a lot of Turkish archers of the new generation. They are anchoring here to the tip of the chin or under the chin and putting the string onto the nose, mainly because, especially in Okcular Vakfi, trainers who had been trained by the archery society or whatever federation, archery federation, Turkish archery federation, in a completely different school. I mean, in modern archery.
Modern archery,
they are following more or less modern methods or mixing them with the authentic ones, and they don't know anything about the authentic ones. So but of course, from a practical point of view, these kind of modifications or degenerations, deformations, increases the accuracy, target accuracy. So this is another point that I have been emphasizing, whether you have to be obsessed with the authentic technique, or whether you have to be obsessed with competition success. But for competition, for accuracy, there are better developed systems. Compound bow, pick up a compound bow if you want to create holes on a target face. But the traditional bow was meant to kill, actually, to kill the enemy or to kill a game animal, whatever it is. So accuracy needed was the accuracy needed on the battlefield and for hunting purposes. So these kind of things. Let me tell you something. When I just started the journey, I went to Hungary. Hungary is another very important castle of traditional archery in Europe, but they followed a very wrong path, and unfortunately, we are under the same risk, because there some scholars started the tradition by reconstructing the Hungarian bow of the 10th century based on some archaeological findings. Before they even decide whether or not their reconstruction was historically true, some practitioners just jumped into the stage and started producing or making some bows, and they introduced that to the market. And of course, because of these motivations that I told you before,
maybe for money as well.
Not only that, also that you have pride, religious beliefs, all these kind of motives. They really attacked to these kind of bows. And I have very good friends of mine from Hungarian Academy, the good scholars who have been working on this subject, like Dr. Balázs Sudar, Dr. Szőlősi Gábor. These guys still are discussing how the Hungarian bow really was. But in the last 40 years, all the practitioners have been shooting with a bow that they are sure is the Hungarian bow of the 10th century. So are the shooting techniques. But what I cannot bear is they don't have any written sources. They don't have depictions. We do. We have a lot of written sources. But people don't read, people don't analyze, people do not test them, people do not confirm their field's reliability or credibility. Okay, so that's why I say it should be done cold-bloodedly in a very scientific, on a very scientific level, carefully. Otherwise, you go to another path. Okay, I did it and it happened, but this is not the way, right?
I see. That's so many good points there. Very interesting. Okay, another question which I know you're also a specialist about is the khatra. So someone is asking, do you have any experience or evidence the khatra can improve accuracy, and if so, how?
Okay, khatra is an Arabic word again.
Yes.
Pronounced khatra. That's why I spell it with K and H so that the English-speaking people can read it correctly. But it caused some confusion in European people. They pronounce it khatra or something like that. It's khatra. In Turkish phonetics, we prefer pronouncing it khatra because the Turkish and Arabic phonetics are different. So this is actually originally, it is the swinging of the tail of camels. So it is a movement like that. So probably referring to the khatra in which the bow is tilted forward. But as I told you before, with some sports scientists and by using infrared speed cameras, we compared the efficiencies of these two types of khatra. The khatra that the bow is tilted forward and the one that the bow is swinged out, exactly. So the second one, which is used in Japanese archery in some Korean schools, is better in controlling the oscillation. But there's always that problem, how the old people wrote. It is not like the modern textbooks, okay? The way that they describe is different. So when you read it more carefully, you see that there is a torque given to the bow. Anyway, even you perform some forward touch. So otherwise, I checked it with speed cameras, with paper sheets, everything. If you don't give any torque, the clearance of the arrow is not good. Maybe only if the arrow is very well spine matched. But in thumb release, it doesn't have to be spine matched. If you are a good performer of khatra, you can shoot almost every spine of arrow, almost. Because the pragmatism of a warrior, when you find an ammunition on the battlefield, when you're out of arrows, you can be able to shoot any arrow that you can pick up from the ground. So it is possible with a thumb ring if you perform a good khatra, because the spine issue is eliminated, not completely, but in combat distances, because you would need the ammunition that you pick up from the ground when you're in a danger. So when the enemy is far from you, it's close. So with a good khatra, you can shoot almost every spine of arrow with an acceptable accuracy. This is a demonstration that I am doing to our visitors, to my students and everyone. I shoot with different bows and arrows that I don't know the draw weights of. I can pick some pick someone's arrows. Even the length are different. I can shoot one from here because it belongs to a short lady, for example, the other one here, and from say 18-meter distance, the arrows have a grouping of 20 centimeters, which is quite acceptable to kill a man from 20 meters.
Yeah. You mentioned that there's the forward khatra and the swinging. Perhaps you know Armin Hirme from Malta Archery. He says there is also a khatra which is like diagonal like this. So rather than forward and also slightly like this.
Exactly. In a 14th century Mamluk treatise, it said that the upper limb of the bow should be canted to right a little bit. And if you do that by giving a torque to the grip rather than rotating from your wrist, so you hold the bow vertically and give the torque with these three fingers, then the upper limb is canted to right, and the outcome is a hybrid khatra, let's say, like the khatra introduced. So it is not this, not this, something in between. And our tests also showed that it is as good as the outward khatra. So it provides or causes great clearance of the arrow.
Okay, very interesting, very good.
Probably the forward khatra is not an absolutely forward movement, but something in between. You give a torque and tilt the ball forward.
In your club, at what point do you introduce, if you have a student who is going through the curriculum, at what point do you introduce them to practicing the khatra?
Torba stage. But in Kepaze, we teach them how to grip, because khatra is the natural outcome of the pre-applied forces. So you have to apply the forces in a correct way to the grip, so that the grip will jump automatically without any conscious intention. So they start practicing it in Torba stage, but beforehand, in Kepaze stage, they have to learn how to apply the forces to the grip.
Right, I see. Okay, another question. Someone is asking, in a normal situation, obviously, coronavirus, you can't do much training at the club. How often do you train at the club, and what training do you do at home to support that, like physical training or things like that?
Okay, we are practicing 2 times a day, 2 times a week for the whole of the whole of the members, and 3 times a week for the advanced ones. There is a third training session which is not open to everyone, only for the black bracelets. The black bracelet is deserved after 11 months of training if there are no interruptions. Okay, so when someone starts with Kepaze training, no interruptions, nothing, in 11 months he's going to get or is able to be examined for the black bracelet, and after getting the black bracelet can participate the third session of the week as well. So for the advanced one, 3 times a week. I practice only 2 times a week because of my professional issues. I cannot spend more time in archery. Other than that, I used to pull Kepaze every day, but in the last few years, I have been doing strength training. So with strength training, Kepaze do not match only in the aerobic days, aerobic exercise days. I can pull a few, and in Corona days, I have been doing Kepaze pulling. I'm a strong believer that the fundamental is in Kepaze. So if you master Kepaze and Torba, it doesn't matter whether you are able to practice for long distances, for flat shooting or whatever. The fundamentals are in these 2 stages at the very beginning. And as a part of our training methodology, we are doing stump shooting, but it is occasionally. We don't do that on a proper on a consistent pace. It is actually a North American way
Yes.
of practice for hunting situations. We are going to the woods and shooting at practical targets like tree stumps, leaves, branches. It is very good to judge the distance for instinctive shooters. Such a stage is inevitable, is necessary, is essential. But it is, as I said, not something we can do often because of circumstances we have in Istanbul. It's a metropolitan city with a population of 20.
Yeah.
So going to the countryside is not very easy.
I remember seeing, I think maybe it was on YouTube or maybe the Instagram, you were doing some stump shooting with Adam Karpowitz.
Exactly. Adam was a mentor and a very good friend of me, and he is also the master of Cem Dönmez, who now is a master bowyer, who has been Turkish bows for the last 15 years. We started almost the same time. So I remember the long telephone conversations we used to do with Cem, and there was a joke between us. I said, I'm talking more often than I'm talking with my wife. So he lives in another city, in Izmir, in the west coast of Turkey. So Adam was enough to teach him the art. Adam is a self-taught bowyer, by the way, and in the last Conquest Cup, he came here and shot 500 meters with a self-made composite Turkish bow. As I said, he's a good friend, and he was kind enough to spend some more time with me and with my friends. And we offered him going to stump shooting because it's also a very entertaining thing and a very good opportunity to be with friends. So we took him with some experienced and advanced Tirendaz crew and did stump shooting together. Yeah.
Very good. So obviously Adam has so much experience in bow making. He's done a lot of research. This student that you mentioned, what is his name? Cem? The student?
Cem is not my student. Cem is
Cem is a student of Adam. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let's say the apprentice of Adam.
Apprentice. Yeah. So he lives. He's Turkish. He lives in Turkey.
Yes, he lives in Izmir.
Okay.
Turkish.
And he is the only apprentice of Adam, or Adam has other apprentices?
Well, Adam is a self-taught. That's what I said. I'm a self-taught individual as well, because and this is the worst and the most difficult part. If you don't have any master to learn from, then you have to find your way. And my intention was from the very beginning to develop a methodology, because my main goal was not satisfying myself by being able to shoot good. I thought that it is important to teach people and to make them actually shoot as well as I do, and to be able to do research as well as I do, even better if they can.
Sure. Yeah.
Or giving interviews. I have been in many TV programs live in national channels. So these kind of abilities can be acquired with good training, with good education. So, and this kind of good education, good training requires a system, a methodology.
Yeah, correct.
So, and it has been my main goal from the very beginning, not only satisfying myself, not only learning myself.
Sure. You mentioned at the Tirendaz Club you have the black bracelet. This is the highest level you have, or there is still higher?
Yes. We have also an instructor level, but there is still just 2 instructors, one of them being mine. The other one is Harun Deniz, a good friend, a very advanced and very skilled archer. We have also a methodology for becoming an instructor, including giving these meetings that I told you that we are organizing once every month. So at least of these meetings must be done by the candidate, because in these meetings it's actually giving a lecture for almost 1.5 hours,
Right.
including some live demonstrations. So they are explaining the historical aspect, the methodology, and they are demonstrating, even shooting at aerial discs live. So they have to be skilled practically and theoretically.
Yes.
Other than that, they have to give at least, they have to give lectures, and at least 2 of them had to be articles for the website.
Right. I guess this is very good. It makes sure that their standard is always high.
Yeah, this standard is very high, in fact, very high. And I'm very happy with that. Of course, it's a problem that we cannot increase the number of the instructors as fast as we can, but we don't want to step back. So this standard is quite high, but is reachable. So people who really have the ambition and will to reach this level, then they have to work hard.
Do you have any it seems like your club is only ground archery, but do you have any interest, or you have anyone who practices horseback archery as well?
Excuse me, interrupted.
Okay.
I could not get the second part.
In your club, it seems most of the archers are ground archers. Do you have anyone who practices horse archery, and do you train for that as well?
We train for that, first of all, because horseback archery is not another discipline. And I have to say that it is not like horseback archery or foot archery. That is archery.
Right.
All the techniques with thumb release would allow any archer to shoot from on horseback, or from a walking position, from a running position, on move, I mean, not horseback. If you move, if you run, you can shoot comfortably and accurately, as we demonstrate. And in the Safavid sources, in the Iranian, it's again a Turkish source, because yes, dynasty was a Turkish dynasty who ruled Iran in 16th century, or until the 16th century, because the Ottoman Sultan Selim I brought them to an end in 1517, and the Safavid period left a lot of written sources as well, and they say most of the training for horseback archery was performed on foot, because four-legged animals are not do not have the endurance level that the bipedal creatures have. So we endure better than the horses. So most of training is performed on foot. All these shooting, loading from the hand, and everything. And what we are doing is shooting on move is a part of our training. Shooting on aerial discs on move. And of course, riding should be practiced separately, which is, of course, essential. As I told you, in Istanbul, unlike the countryside, it is not easy to have access to horse riding. It is both expensive, requires time. In the countryside, in small towns, it's much more easier and inexpensive.
Yeah. Someone asking a question here. They say, you know, in history we read that the Ottomans, they really took archery to the top point, to the zenith. Do you think that they exhausted all the possibilities of improving technique, or is there still things that we can learn and improve on?
Well, first of all, Ottomans brought it to an unsurpassed level on flight archery only. So the martial aspects of the art should be taken, or should be taken from the Seljuk era or Mamluk era. Seljuk is a little bit earlier. Seljuk is from 11th to late 13th century, even early 14th century, the pre-Ottoman era. But the Great Seljuk Sultanate or Empire ruled the modern Iraq, Iran, Syria, Egypt, very large geographical area. And they were known with their skill in archery, as reported by the Crusaders. When the Crusaders came to Anatolia in 1096, they encountered Kılıç Arslan I, the Seljuk Sultan. And interestingly, the European sources insist to call all the Muslim warriors that they faced as Saracens or Sarazan, according to the language. But they had different ethnicity. They had different different cultures. Even they were also in the same pot named Islam. So the first Saracens that the Crusader armies encountered were the Seljuks, and they were known with their speed shooting skills, with their accuracy, and with their deadly archery skills and abilities. And the Mamluks, they were founded in 1250, and as I told you before, brought to an end by Selim I in 1517. So there is a 300-year long culture there, a martial culture, and they wrote a lot, fortunately. So they left a lot of treatises, but the Ottomans brought it to an unsurpassed level in flight archery and bow making, because I think, for my best knowledge, the most energy efficient bows are the Korean and the Ottoman bows. I mean, in the Asian bow family. So only the Korean bow can be compared with the Ottoman bow. But if it comes to shooting for distance, Korean bows are not as good as the Ottoman bows. So, but the martial aspect, the military use, for the military use of bow, Ottomans are not typical. Ottomans are well known with their skills. Ottoman soldiers, especially the infantry, the janissaries, were known in but of course, the bow and arrow have been used until 1790 in the Ottoman armies, and even in 17th century, during the second siege of Vienna, there was a report of one of the Italian commanders who commanded the Habsburg army against the Ottomans. He said in his book that the Ottoman Sipahi is very dangerous with the bow and arrow, and even the cuirassiers, the Austrian cavalry who wore some chest armor, metal chest armor, even they are in danger when they encounter the Sipahi. So even late 17th century, the bow was a weapon of war in the Ottoman army, and still as a tool, a weapon that the enemy was afraid of. Bringing it to an unsurpassed level is probably more accurate for Mamluks and Seljuks.
I see. Very interesting. Tell me, what is the difference between a Sipahi and a Janissary? Are they the same thing or are they different? And if they are different, what is their training like? Is one more specialized? And if you could
it's quite complicated, but I'm going to explain it as briefly as possible. Okay.
Thank you.
Sipahi is a Persian word meaning soldier. But afterwards, the meaning changed to the mounted soldiers. So Sipahi is the cavalry, is the knight in the Muslim world, okay? Janissary is the infantry of the central army. Ottomans had a central army, which means kapı kulu in Turkish, and the state soldiers. The state soldiers were trained and fed by high-rank military officers who had land, and instead of giving taxes based on their income from that land, they just fed soldiers. These lands were called timar, has, or zeamet. So they were specific lands which or the owners, not the owners, because they didn't own the land. The Sultan owned the land.
Yeah.
But people who own the land.
Managing the land, maybe.
Got the income from the agricultural products, right?
Right.
Instead of paying tax for that, they just fed soldiers. And both the Central Army and this countryside had sipahi. And the sipahi of the Central Army called Kapıkulu Sipahisi, and these mounted warriors of the countryside or peripheral section were called Timarlı Sipahi. They were both mounted archers. But after the second half of the 16th century, the significance of Sipahi decreased because the firearms gained popularity. And instead of using bow and arrow, carbines and pistols were engaged. So that's why they were employed mostly for the protection of the carriages, for example, who carried gunpowder or food or whatever. So they provided security for the logistic instead of fighting. But except the second siege of Vienna, as I told you, there are reports. It is 1683, by the way. So end of 17th century, they were still in the battlefield.
Right, very interesting. Yeah, so they were used for quite a long time.
Exactly. It's because the muskets, the hand cannons, entered the Ottoman army in 1440. But in 1790, there were troops using bow and arrow. So even after the introduction of firearms or let's say muskets, including the hand cannons, the very primitive form of muskets, almost 300 years, bow and the firearms have been used together in the army. So neither of them could have been ejected.
Right. Many people seem to think that as soon as the gunpowder was introduced and muskets and things, then the archery was immediately done away with and not used anymore, become redundant. But that's not the case.
It's a misbelief. In Ottomans, it was used until the end of 18th century. In Mughals, what we say Shahlar, is another Turkish dynasty, Turkish-Mongolian dynasty, in fact, who ruled north of India. When they were fighting the British army in mid-1800s, so we're talking about mid-19th century, the English soldiers, officers report archers who fought with bow and arrow against the rifles.
Wow, amazing. Very interesting to know that. Very interesting. Okay, I know this is the part 2 of our conversation, and I didn't want to make it too long because I'm sure you have other things to do, but we really appreciate your time. I want to just finish on some very quick questions, and then perhaps we can think about, I have obviously more questions, but we can maybe think of another time we can meet. Anyway, okay, these are like quick fire questions really. Do you prefer laminate bow or composite bow to shoot with?
Very, very good question. I prefer laminated bow, even all resin bows. You know why? Because the composite bows are not user-friendly. So a composite bow is the real representative of the culture, of the tradition. So advanced archer should have at least one and should be able to get on well with it, because they are not user-friendly. You have to learn how to string it, how to unstring it, how to maintain it, how to keep it in good condition. But in the practical use, the laminated, even an all-resin bow, because all-resin bows mimic the original design better. So if it comes to the feeling of holding a piece of history in your hand, all-resin bows are quite good, right? But not a good performance as laminated bows. But I like laminated bows in similar traditions, like in Korea, for example. Only higher rank archers are allowed to use composite bows. So this is also what I think using alternative materials, modern materials, allows us to equip newcomers with inexpensive archery tackle. So it's a good idea. And it is also good in the learning process until you master actually what you do, so that you don't ruin an expensive weapon.
Yes,
with
absolutely.
misuse.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes we say you must deserve the bow that you shoot. You cannot just, even if you have money, you can buy the expensive bow. It doesn't mean you deserve to shoot that bow.
Perfect. You said a very interesting thing that I have to refer to something that I emphasized many times. You know, there are a lot of bows in the museums collections that are very well decorated, especially in the museums of Turkey. They are very well decorated with gold paintings, etc. And in the last few years in Turkey, everyone who finds a calligrapher immediately ask him to write a text on his bow or make some decorations. But in the old Turkish culture, only the advanced warriors were allowed to decorate their weapons. Not only their helmet. For example, there are some clear records about decorating the helmets with the feathers of birds of prey. The falcon feather, for example, can be put onto the helmet only if the warrior is able to shoot backwards, the so-called Parthian shot from on horseback.
Right.
And I have just one decorated bow, which is a gift from Adam Karpowitz. This bow has never been, and people apply great on me why I don't string the bow and why I don't shoot. Because it's a decorated bow, a masterpiece. I don't want to ruin it, first of all. But on the other hand, I don't consider myself as a master. If I consider myself as a master who really deserves having a decorated bow, then I would decorate.
Sure, I understand. Having the feather is it reminds me of in history of early Islam when the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad Sayyidina Hamza, he would go to battle. In his turban or helmet, he would have ostrich feathers, so they would see him from far away. So it was something even at that time they would do, put ostrich feather in.
Yeah, well, for the early Islamic history, it may have another meaning, but in Turkish history, it has a completely different meaning, because in the pre-Islamic era, the birds of prey were totem animals. So that's why they somehow have been maintained, maybe by losing their religious meaning, but as a symbol of power and as a symbol of political and military power, they have been kept, like the horse tails. They have some pre-Islamic Turkish tastes, like, let's say. So they have been Islamic era too.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Arrows, wood or carbon?
Wood, for sure. Because carbon, with its large spectrum of spine, are very forgiving. So if you want to master your technique, then you have to have a wooden arrow so that you can see your mistakes. The carbon arrow is very, very
very good. Yeah, that's a good point. I think for me myself, although I do have wooden arrows, I prefer to shoot the carbon because it makes me think I'm more accurate. But as you say, with wooden, it shows your faults more.
Yeah, most of the carbon arrows have a large spine spectrum. Even the spectrum, the spine value is narrower. The dynamic spine is different. I mean, the bending cannot be in a very wide range, but bending back, so flexing back, is so fast. Only bamboo among the natural materials is like carbon. For example, in our group, we use aluminum arrows in torba stage, shooting from a very close distance. Can break the wooden arrows if the release is not mastered. Other than that, we use only woods.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. Okay. Other than the Turkish bow, I'm sure Turkish bow is maybe one of your favorite style. What other bow do you like to shoot?
Korean bow, for sure. And I think the Turkish style is quite a big umbrella that covers everything. As I told you, from the north of India to Iran and to Anatolia, even to the east of Europe, up to the gates of Vienna, this technique has been used with some variations. So
yeah,
nobody can say that the log has been done that way and not that way. So the variations existed for sure. But the Korean bow is another favorite of mine. I love also the early Turkic bows, bows with ears instead of the Kazan section. So a friend, a student in Tirendaz, Selçuk Aydınlıoğlu, recently developed a Selçuk bow prototype. Yeah, it's a laminated one. He actually, not we, I gave some tips, but he did all the research and all the labor. He followed the miniatures from the Seljuk era, and the bow is really good. My favorites in recent times. I really like it. And I have some modern recurve and long bows as well. I rarely shoot them. After having a hernia problem last year, I started shooting with my long bow because it was the weakest bow I have. It was a 35-pounder. So I like all kinds of archery actually, but of course I'm in love with Turkish, or let's say this Asian style of archery, which covers Middle East and the East Europe, Central Asia, Iran.
That's that. What on average? What is your before you had the hernia or any injuries? What was the average poundage of the bow you would shoot normally?
The average poundage I was shooting was 50 to 60 pounds, and the maximum I shot accurately was 96 pounds.
Wow!
And with well, it's not wow, because with this training methodology, people easily can handle heavy bows. For example, there are members under Tirendaz who can complete a whole 3-hour training with a 70-pound bow with no problem. Hakan, by the way, Hakan Kasapoğlu, I say hello to him. He's going to watch this as well. And he's not a very young fellow. He's at his 40s and easily can handle. Most of the advanced archer can handle 90-pound bows, but completing the whole practice with a heavy bow, Hakan is the best among us. 70 pound with no problem, no exhaustance, nothing. Now I shoot only a 37-pounder until my physical ability is back. I hope I'm going to gain it back. But fortunately, I'm able to shoot again. So it is something.
That's good. Okay, last question. If you had the chance to go back to a particular era in history, what time what era would that be?
Wow, very interesting question. May I ask your astrological sign?
My astrological sign, I think Taurus.
Taurus, really? Okay, it is a very, very fantastic question. I really like it. Well, I don't know. Maybe I would prefer to live in some historical era, where people are much more integrated in nature. That their main concern was just getting a few protein for their families. Not that sophisticated, not that complicated like it is now.
A simple life. You want a simple life?
Yeah, I'm really after a simple life. I've always been, despite all the consequences of my profession and the city that I live in.
I hope we can all. I think this period is very interesting for us now that we are living on lockdown in coronavirus time. It's showing us that there's so many things we don't need to have in life, and it is possible to live a much simpler life, and we become a lot more relaxed and a lot more less stress. You know, normally we are just running after work and this, and now we realize actually, we don't need to have all of these extra things in our life.
Exactly. I agree with you. I have lived such a life, in fact. So my wife is someone like me. So we have always had a humble life. And this coronavirus curse may be an evolutionary step in humans' life. Maybe they, as you said, understood that we need less than we thought.
Exactly. Dr. Murat, I'd like to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you giving us your time and talking to us. I hope that Allah give you shifa from all injuries and any illnesses, and you can be back to 100% very soon. I will also try to, I'm sure we will work together to try and make the first UK clinic happen. Maybe this year, next year, we will see, but we will try to
hopefully.
communicate.
We will, it is an occasion to say to the audiences actually that we have been planning to organize a clinic, a workshop in England for Turkish traditional archery. Hope we can do that in 2021 probably, right? In 2020.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Maybe to do it this year, it's probably a little bit too much to hope for, but let's see. We never know what happens.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for the interview, and please let me know when you put it to the internet, to YouTube.
Of course, I will send you a copy. Thank you very much, Dr. Murat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, okay, goodbye.